And we are live.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the October 7th Subdivision Review Committee meeting. And would the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Chair Holloway,
Present?
Ms. Gutierrez,
Present.
Ms. Brandt,
Present.
Mr. Santiago,
Here.
Mr. Zaragoza, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite hear. Is Mr. Zaragoza in the meeting? Okay. Ms. Floyd,
Present.
Ms. Nygren, Mr. Hicks.
Present.
Okay, so
Okay.
It sounds like the sheriff will be the voting member then today. Okay, in compliance with directives of the County, State, and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, this meeting is live streamed and closed to the public. The temporary procedure is subject to change pursuant to guidelines related to social distancing and minimizing person-to-person contact. To make a verbal comment at today's meeting, please dial 916-875-2500. Follow the prompts to be placed into the queue for a specific item or as an off-agenda matter. When I open the public comment for a specific item or off-agenda item, you will then be transferred from the queue into the meeting to make your verbal comment. Written comments are always accepted. Please send your email comment to board clerk, capital B, capital C, one word, at saccounty.net. Your comment will be routed to the committee and filed in the public record. Please speak with a handset or a headset. Mute your devices when not speaking to minimize background noise. Announce your name, please, when you're speaking on an agenda item or voting so that everyone will know who has the floor. When I call for a motion or a second, please announce your name prior to making the motion or second. The clerk will take a voice vote to confirm the results of the vote. The Subdivision Review Committee is the county's hearing authority and designated advisory body for all matters related to tentative parcel maps. The committee is comprised of senior staff from county departments of planning, engineering, environmental management, a safety officer from either Metro Fire or the Sheriff's Department, and myself, a public representative appointed by the board. In instances where an item is being considered by the committee also involves a use permit, special development permit, or other type of permit, a simultaneous meeting of this committee and the zoning administrator may be convened, and the representative from planning may also act as a zoning administrator and render decisions on certain permit applications. As a hearing authority for these items, the committee takes into consideration all county codes, the general plan, and other relevant county ordinances, resolutions, policies, and regulations applicable to its examination and review of tentative parcel maps. The decision of the committee on these matters is final unless appeal is filed within 10 days of the decision with the clerk of the board. Appeals of committee decisions are considered by the Planning Commission. And would the clerk please administer the oath to any public members who may be on the line?
Certainly. Please raise your right hand and the appropriate response is I do. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give this committee is the truth, so help you God? If you do not swear, do you so affirm?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, and if everybody could please mute your phones. We're getting a little background noise. And would the clerk please call the first item, which is approval of the minutes?
Certainly. The first item is to approve the action summary from September 16, 2021.
Okay, do we have any additions or corrections to the minutes? None appearing. The chair would entertain a motion.
Member Santiago, move to approve the action summary of September 16, 2021.
Thank
Member
you, Tony.
Gutierrez, seconds.
And I will second the motion. Okay, So we have a motion and a second. Without further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Chair Holloway,
Aye.
Ms. Gutierrez,
Aye.
Mr. Santiago,
Aye.
Ms. Floyd,
Aye.
and Mr. Hicks.
Aye.
Okay, looks like motion passes.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 2 is approve amendments to the Subdivision Review Committee rules and procedures. Do we have a staff report on this?
This is Katrina Nelson with the County Counsel's Office.
Hey, welcome back, Katrina.
Thank you. So yeah, I can speak briefly to the proposed amendments. If you recall, back in December of 2018, the SRC approved by motion kind of to change the meeting time from 8:30 to 9 o'clock. But I believe at that time, your rules document, which basically was a set of rules for the conduct of the SRC business that was approved back in 2008 by the SRC, was never revised to reflect that change. And so we're just bringing that item forward to kind of make sure that your rules document shows the meeting time you currently have now of 9 o'clock. And it also makes kind of these minor cleanup changes to align the names of the departments that comprise the membership of the SRC to what we currently know them as, and also kind of clarify that it's the board clerk that actually keeps the record of proceedings. So there should be there's a strike through that was attached to the agenda packet. If you scroll down, well, yeah. Anyway, so those are the main amendments that we're asking you to approve today.
Yeah, basically a red line.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any questions about any of the changes or correction on this? None appearing. Katrina, do you want us to pass a motion to adopt this?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. May we have a motion for approving this item?
Member Santiago, move to approve amendments to the SRC rules and procedure.
Thank you, Tony. Maybe have a second?
This member Floyd, I'll make a motion to second.
I'll second the item. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Chair Holloway,
Aye.
Ms. Gutierrez,
Aye.
Mr. Santiago,
Aye.
Ms. Floyd,
Aye.
and Mr. Hicks.
Aye.
It looks like we have approval.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to public hearing items. Item number 3, West Elkhorn Boulevard tentative map.
Okay, so item 3 is PLNP 2020-00181 West Elkhorn Boulevard tentative parcel map. The request is for a tentative parcel map and design review. The environmental document is an addendum to the prior final environmental impact report.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have a staff report on this?
Good morning, this is Meredith Holsworth. I'll be doing the presentation on this item this morning. I do have
Welcome,
a
Meredith.
PowerPoint if you can pull that up.
I'm sorry, what I'm seeing on screen, this is Katrina, is actually the training workshop for item 4, which are not the slides for this presentation.
So maybe we need to turn the screen share authority over to Meredith. There we go.
Oh, there it is. That's right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay. Good morning. As I said, this is Meredith Holsworth. I'm the project manager for the West Elkhorn tentative parcel map. And if you could go to the next slide, please. So the project site is located at the southwest corner of the West Elkhorn Boulevard and Metro Air Parkway intersection in the Metro Air Park Special Planning Area. And the project site is currently undeveloped. Next slide, please. I'm not seeing it advance to the next slide, but I might just have a delay. The project site is zoned Metro Air Park SPA, and it is surrounded on all four sides by SPA zoning. Next slide, please. The entitlement request is for a tentative parcel map to divide approximately 5.58 acres into 4 lots and a design review to comply with the countywide and the Metro Air Park design guidelines. Next slide, please. The subject properties within Districts 5A and 5C of the SPA. District 5A is entitled the Office Hotel Retail Services District Core, which is intended to serve as the focus of business activity in Metro Air Park by providing for small office uses and retail uses for visitors and employees. District 5C is the Office Hotel Retail Services District Central, which is intended to provide office space as well as commercial services which are in support of the airport, and the Metro Air Park users. The corresponding underlying zone for both of these districts, as referenced in the zoning code, is GC, or General Commercial. Proposed parcels 1, 2, and 4 would be within District 5A, while parcel 3 would be in District 5C. Next slide, please. There is no development proposed at this time, but the map would facilitate future development of a commercial, office, hotel, or retail nature. The lot sizes for the proposed parcels range from 0.44 to 2.47 acres. As of this meeting, no comments from members of the public have been received, and this project is consistent as proposed with the general plan, zoning code, and the SPA. Next slide, please. The Natoma CPAC met on July 8th, 2021 and recommended the SRC approve their requested entitlements. The DRAC met the same day and recommended that the SRC find the project in compliance with the countywide and the Metro Air Park design guidelines. Next slide, please. Staff is recommending approval and the following actions: to recognize the addendum to the prior FEIR and determine that is still the appropriate document for the project, to approve the tentative parcel map, and to find the project in compliance with the countywide and Metro Air Park design guidelines. And that concludes my staff presentation. I'm available for questions, and we have Steve Norman with the applicant team on the line as well. Thank you.
Brian or Steve, if you're talking, we cannot hear you. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. I apologize.
Okay.
I had a nice little thing going. Do we have any comments from the applicant?
This is Stephen Norman, CNA Engineering. Not that I know of,
Welcome, Mr. Norman.
Good morning, everyone. I don't have in front of me the staff report with conditions of approval, and I asked Jarrell, the project manager in my office, where the staff report is, and he said I never got one. So is there a staff report with conditions? I literally have not seen them. So for me to say
there is, and we just heard it. but we didn't go through all the conditions of approval. So
Yeah, I haven't, usually I take time to read all the conditions of approval to make sure they're all okay.
So the conditions of approval were provided before condition review, and they haven't changed since then.
Well, then that's fine then. Okay. I didn't know.
So you saw them at PRC condition review, right? And they haven't changed?
Yes. Okay. Then that's fine. I just saying, usually I get something before the meeting, and everything's finalized, but yeah, we're all good then. I do know there have been discussions about the future right of way with DOT. I've been in an email chain with Javed from JTS on their project, and they've done some revising the future right of way widths on some at this intersection, and I know we haven't revised our tentative map to comply with those new dimensioning, but we're good with them, with the design that they came up with.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other public comments? Am I on mute?
Nope.
Okay. It sounds like we have no other public comments. So let's see. What's the pleasure of the committee?
This is Member Gutierrez. I don't have any questions, so I'd be comfortable moving staff's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second? I'll second the item. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Are there any further questions? If none, would you please call a roll?
Certainly. Chair Holloway?
Aye.
Ms. Gutierrez?
Aye.
Mr. Santiago?
Aye.
Ms. Floyd?
Aye.
Mr. Hicks?
Aye.
Okay, looks like we have approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item number 4, Subdivision Review Committee Training Workshop. Haven't had one of these in quite a while.
Exactly. So this is Chris Bahuli, Principal
Mr.
Planner.
Bahuli, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. So just as you mentioned, Chair Holloway, it's been a while since we've done a training, and with the number of new members or recent changes to the membership of the Subdivision Review Committee, we thought it would be a great opportunity and perfect timing to have a training session. And so we've been working very closely with the Clerk of the Board's office and also with County Council to prepare this training. County Council is going to lead the presentation and walk through the various slides that were put together. So I wanted to turn it over to Katrina Nelson, and she is going to perform the training for you all today.
Thank you. Katrina?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And so, yeah, Chris said, we can dive right in. I'm not sure if there's anyone from the applicant group still of the previous item, but, you're more than welcome to stay to understand better kind of how SRC works. But, please don't feel obligated to also stay through the training. Anyway, so the SRC was established through County Code. Can you, next slide, please? Okay, thank you. So SRC was established by County Code Chapter 2.33, and which had a pretty broad kind of set of purposes. It's tasked with providing technical advice regarding any matter referred to it by the County Planning Commission, including examination or review of tentative maps, preliminary maps, street dedication maps, reversions to acreage, abandonments of easements and dedications, acts as advisory agency as provided in this code, conduct notices of violation proceedings under the MAP Act, and also consider and approve certificates of compliance as provided in Title 22, conduct public hearings on environmental impact reports as provided by the current guidelines adopted by the Board of Supervisors. So that's, as you can see, that's pretty broad. In practice, the SRC's purview has narrowed significantly to basically serve as the hearing body and designated advisory agency for all matters related to tentative parcel maps. Basically, subdivisions of real property of up to 4 lots. Next slide, please. Also, I forgot to mention, if anyone has a question, feel free to interrupt me, or, Alma or Chris, if there's anything you want to add as I go through the slides, please also don't hesitate to interrupt me. All right, so the membership of the SRC also is established by county code. You have a chairperson who is appointed by the Board of Supervisors, a representative from planning, a representative from our Public Works Department, which we've interpreted to be SIPs, a representative from EMD, a representative from Parks or a Parks District, which I believe has not been appointed for a while, and a safety representative. So as I said, the chair, your safety representative, and the Parks Department representative is appointed by the board. All other members of the committee are appointed by the CEO upon recommendation of their respective department heads. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview of what we will cover in today's workshop. We will be covering kind of your role as committee members and the meeting procedures and how the SRC should be conducting its business, as well as I'll be providing a very general overview of the Brown Act as it applies to SRC. What we will not be covering are, conflicts of interests and financial conflicts of interests. Those are kind of separate comprehensive trainings in and of themselves, as well as Public Records Acts, which I'm sure all of your departments have some familiarity with. Next slide, please. So what does it mean for SRC to be a formal hearing body or advisory agency to the County Board of Supervisors? It basically means that you are asked to consider and recommend approval of a parcel map application by applying a set of facts to establish laws, regulations, and standards of criteria, which is essentially what already is kind of what you do and what is described in your staff reports. When you have an item for consideration before you, you go through whether the application meets all required applicable standards for approval, including design guidelines, whether it's gone through environmental review under CEQA, whether it's consistent with the county's general plan and use regulations, and how compatible it is with the rest of the neighborhood. So as a formal hearing body, you have a duty to investigate, approve, disapprove, or conditionally approve. And whether you decide to approve or deny an application, you must include findings, essentially explain the reasons why you approve or deny a particular application. The SRC actions, decisions, essentially on parcel map applications are final, but they can be appealed to the Planning Commission by the applicant if it's a denial, or some other aggrieved person by filing a written appeal to the board clerk within 10 days of the decision. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, the SRC is governed by a document entitled Rules for the Conduct of Business, which the SRC approved in 2008, and which you can amend from time to time. Currently, our office, along with the board clerk's office and planning management, is looking over the rules to see if there's anything we need to kind of update and revise. But this is something that you can adopt and amend as a committee by yourselves. It doesn't mean you don't need board approval to do it. So part of being a formal hearing body of the county, a few things I wanted to highlight in terms of your role as a member of SRC. It's interesting because a lot of the members of the SRC also are county staff, And so it's important to kind of separate when you're sitting on SRC as a hearing body member versus a member of staff who has, more expertise and particular knowledge about specific kind of conditions associated with a project. As a hearing body member, you need to you're asked to take a step back and kind of look at the overall project, right, as it fits with kind of county planning documents, not just your particular department that you represent. Another thing that is helpful is that members hopefully should be reading, skimming the agenda materials before the actual meeting. And this actually helps in streamlining the meetings, because any questions or concerns you have about specific conditions or about the application itself, these are things that you can bring up to the planning person assigned to that project. And they're able, once you do that, they're able to discuss those concerns or kind of answer those questions either before the meeting or during the meeting while they're giving the presentation. Also, we wanted to highlight the formality of the SRC meetings as in contrast to the PRC meetings. And I can let Chris, if do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I think that's a distinction that we definitely wanted to talk a little bit more about. I think as many of you know, in the past we had the SRC meetings kind of bumping up against the PRC. I think that was the change that was presented before you this morning with the red line of why we moved the time of the meetings was because they were right before the PRC meetings. And PRC is a bit more free-flowing and really is the opportunity for the applicant teams and for staff to ensure that conditions are daylighted, and issues are daylighted, during that PRC condition review initial review part of the meeting. And then at condition review, making sure that between the applicant teams and the staff that we're all clear on conditions and exhibits moving forward to the final hearing. Again, that being contrasted with the SRC hearing, which generally speaking, the project with its conditions that are being recommended should be baked at that point and ready for consideration. Now, that not to say that things don't change at hearings, because they do. Conditions are challenged and conditions are modified, but by and large, that should be an exception rather than the rule. And so the expectation is that at these hearings that they do kind of follow a certain decorum, and that the materials are that are before the SRC are in a state where they are able to be acted upon by the SRC members. And so that's all I had, Katrina.
Thanks,
Good
Chris.
explanation. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, and so just another item I wanted to point in terms of the formality of proceeding. I think that's also why the county has been taking steps to kind of make it more formal. And one of those was assigning county counsel to attend your meetings so that, we can serve as a resource for you in case there are any questions about the process or, or just kind of how to do the votes and all that. So I'm here to answer questions of the committee, not necessarily sitting here as counsel for specific, departments, which since I had also advised some of the departments that have conditions associated with a project. So kind of just hopefully you guys remember that. So I'm always here if you need any question, if you have any questions about the process. Anyway, next slide, please. And I don't know if I have a delay, but I'm not seeing thank you. Okay, so it's the one above. All right, so getting into it, you need a quorum to conduct an SRC meeting. And what that means is you need a majority of your entire membership. Currently, because the SRC only has 5 members, given that there's no Parks Department rep, technically your quorum is 3. You can have 3 members and move forward with a meeting. However, I think what we do is we consider the entire membership as if it were complete with Parks. And so I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, board clerk, but we use 4 as a quorum for this committee. If a quorum is present, committee may take action by a vote of majority of the present, meaning if there's 4 members present at the SRC meeting, you can approve an action with only 3 affirmative votes. And we can get into that later on in our slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so order of business. Your SRC rules document provides kind of the order of business as to how it should be conducted during the meeting, which you know, the SRC already does this. First should be approval of action summaries, then a call for any items to be continued. Then you swear in any persons who wish to speak and provide testimony before the committee. And then you have the discussion of public hearing items. The chair basically runs the meeting and maintains order during the meeting and recognizes other members before they can speak. Next slide, please.
Hey, Katrina, could you walk me through that last item? Because I don't think we actually do that. Because nobody puts their hand up. Nobody puts their hand up to be recognized.
You know, and that's true. And so I think that's one of the things that it's not necessary, right? It's not legally required. I think normally that just occurs when someone wants to make a motion. And that's something I think that we're looking at whether we need to keep it in the rules document. You know, your rules document hasn't been changed since 2008. And I think it kind of took language from just kind of old language from other committees that also just were consistent with Robert's Rules of Order. And so that's typically how it's done. But, you know, I mean, I think the point there is that you maintain order. If there's anyone who wants to make a motion and all that, then you kind of recognize them. But I understand that, right?
You know what you might think? One thing you might think about doing is change the word must to may. Because if you had a fairly raucous meeting, which on occasion we have had, and multiple hands are going up, that kind of thing, in an in-person meeting, then that would give the chair the authority to say, okay, this person first, this person second, this person third, or, you know, person 5, you've spoken, you know, several times before, you know, let's let the others speak. So just a kind of a control option there.
Yes, no, thank you. Yes, I'll take note of that and make sure that that's updated in the rules.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next slide, please. The conduct of public hearings. This is also essentially what you do already, but basically the board clerk is asked to call the item for hearing, and then it proceeds as first a presentation by county staff. The planning person that, you know, is responsible for that project makes the presentation. Then if the applicant wants to provide additional information about the project, then he or she may. Once that's done, the chair should formally open the public hearing so that any members of the public who want to speak for or against the project may be heard. During the actual formal public hearing section of the hearing, the applicant also should be given a chance to respond to any comments made by members of the public. And once all members of the public have had an opportunity to speak, the chair closes the public hearing, and that's when deliberation and discussion by the committee starts. And so just two things I wanted to kind of remind here is that during your discussion and deliberations, and I think this is where the kind of staff hat versus member hat comes in as well, is that most of your questions as a general matter should be directed to the staff that made the presentation. Of course, we know that kind of members of the SRC are the respective kind of experts of their departments and might have signed off on or crafted the actual conditions of approval that his or her department has put forth as part of that project approval. And that's fine. It's great if you can provide feedback or additional insight during the discussion, but kind of want to make sure that there's kind of a clear understanding here that when you are deliberating, you're deliberating as a member of the SRC, and kind of not as a staff member representing your department. This is also where kind of it's helpful to review the agenda materials before it comes in so there are no surprises essentially, right? So that any questions you have about specific conditions that your department has put forth, you can kind of have those questions answered already in advance, or, you can put the staff person presenting on notice that that's something that they need to discuss. The following discussion and deliberation, committee should vote. Next slide, please. And all actions by the SRC require a motion and a second prior to the actual vote. So I know that the SRC typically does a vote by roll call, which is where you call each individual member and ask them to say yay or nay on the project. You can also do a voice vote where you especially if it's not a contentious or a controversial project, where the chair can just ask everyone who votes for the project say aye and kind of do it that way. So that's kind of another option that available to you if you want to use that. If you're voting.
That's good to know. That's good to know, because we've been doing voice vote, or we've been doing roll call votes on the minutes and non-controversial items. A meeting would move faster if it's not a controversial item, if we could just go with a voice vote. Yeah. So that's okay.
Yes.
Oh, good. That's
okay.
Thank you.
That's okay. And then voting by committee members. So as I mentioned earlier, you need a majority of the quorum. You need majority affirmative votes. So if you have a quorum of 4, if you have 4 members sitting, then you need at least 3 to say aye. If you have 5, then you need at least 4. A tie vote means essentially that a project application is denied or a recommendation for denial. What that just means is that it's an opportunity for someone one of the members who voted for the project to make a motion to reconsider. And we have a slide after to talk about that more. An abstention, if a member abstains from voting, that cannot be construed as a yes or no vote. So it just, it's not counted at all. Next slide, please.
Actually, before you move, Katrina, just to confirm on motions that any member, for items that are before the SRC, that any member of the SRC can make a motion to approve the item before them.
That's
I think
correct.
Maybe in a couple of meetings ago, I think Chair Holloway, I think you were asking for planning to make a recommendation or to make the motion, and just wanted to confirm that any member of the SRC can make a motion on an item.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because customarily over the last couple of years, planning has traditionally made the motions, but any member can do that.
That's correct.
Hey, this is Member Santiago. Katrina, in a previous meeting, you said that only the chair or the planning department can chair the meeting.
So there's a provision in the rules document that says the representative from planning has to sit as the vice chair if the chair isn't available. And so that's certainly something, that if that's not something that, if you want the flexibility to have a vice chair not just be planning, that's really something we could consider and amend in your rules document.
Yeah, so Katrina, just to clarify, I think that the planning representative serves as the secretary of the SRC, and I think that under the description of that position, that it further describes that position is also the vice chair, right? It is kind of weird, but I think that that's the way that it's set up. And
right,
so
yeah.
And so to address the question, Tony, that's why it's either the chair or planning serving as the vice chair that's chairing the meeting.
Yeah.
So either one has to be in attendance. That's what I'm. Otherwise, you would have to continue the hearing.
Well, so that's interesting because, if both are not present, and assuming you have 3 other people, technically, you can, legally, you can move forward with a meeting if you wanted. And I suppose in that scenario, you just amongst yourselves if you do want to move forward with a meeting, then amongst yourselves, you elect who's going to serve as chair for that meeting.
This is Wendy Hartman. I have a question. So for planning, there's usually more than one person that's appointed to that role.
Right.
So I would assume that if, like this week, I believe it was Kimber, if she suddenly wasn't available, then Jessica would step in. So I'm not sure that since we have alternates for that position, it seems like it would be unlikely.
That's correct, Wendy. It would be very unlikely that we would ever not have a planning representative at the meeting.
Katrina, this is Alma from the clerk's office.
Okay.
I have a question. I'd like to go back to the minutes. To approval of the minutes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay, so the minutes or the action summary. It says in the rules of procedure that they need to be approved by the members. And so why wouldn't we take a vote on that item? I can see doing consent like as a group because we do that for other boards. But I do believe that not taking a vote to approve an item on the agenda that is approving like the action summary or something consent, then we do take a vote. And right now I feel like we're taking voice votes because we're not in person. If we were in person, then everybody could say, they could say, is there anyone who, does ever, or is there, how do you vote? Everybody could say aye together, or if there's a no, someone would say no. So.
No, yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think what my point was, Alma, legally, you can do either a roll call vote or a voice vote.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I meant, right. Those two kind of ways of voting are available to you. And I
vote on the minutes.
Right, and I agree on the kind of, given that we're meeting remotely still, it's going to be hard to do a voice vote, right? And so that's why you do the roll call. And I mean, obviously it's kind of your decision, with the board chair as to how you want to you take the vote on each particular item on the agenda. But that's just, I wanted to highlight that those are 2 options available.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Katrina, hi, Katrina. This is Flo. I have a question. I thought, and maybe I could be wrong, that if you're doing a virtual meeting, it's required, I thought it was in the Brown Act, that you do have to do a roll call vote.
Yeah, well, Yes, that's correct. And I mean, I guess I was, I think that's partly why we, for kind of our meetings, our telephonic meetings, we've been doing roll call votes regardless. But that was something I wanted to highlight because even when we're meeting in person, that's not something I think, based on the meetings I've attended with SRC, that's not something that we use frequently. And so I wanted to make sure the members just knew that when we were meeting in person, that you could do a voice vote.
Oh, okay, got it. I'm sorry.
I mean, yeah, and so no, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry I didn't make that distinction, but you're right. Flo's right. Like for purposes of us continuing to meet remotely, given that you can't really tell who's voting without seeing each person, then yes, roll call is appropriate.
And also,
So
I'll add that the consistency has been for us when we're meeting in person. If we're not using an electronic system that can display all of the votes, such as in the board chambers, we do typically like to do a actual voice vote so that people are aware that every member has agreed, or if a member did actually vote no or they wanted to abstain, that it's clear for the record. And I think too, it just helps us as clerks because we are using an actual roll call vote sheet for us so that we can have an accurate record.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, Brian, given kind of the board clerk's preference and kind of practice on this, it sounds like the roll call vote still would be the way to go for meetings moving forward.
Thank you so much, Katrina.
No problem. All right, next slide, please. Unless there's any other questions on this slide, I'll move to the next one. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so motion to reconsider. That happens when, say, there's a tie vote, which I don't think it's pretty rare for this committee, but if there's a tie vote, then a person who voted with the majority can open. No, well, this is probably a typo, but if there's a tie vote, the person who voted in the affirmative can open it. Ask for a motion to reconsider. And that essentially just means, it means two things, two steps, that the person making the motion to reconsider actually make the motion to reconsider. If that passes, then you have the ability to reopen the matter, including reopening the public hearing if you wanted kind of additional insight from members of the public again. So just another tool, which I think is rarely, if ever, used by the SRC. But, a motion to reconsider may be made only during the same meeting at which the initial action was taken, provided all persons who addressed SRC regarding the item are still present. So next slide, please. So findings. Typically, the staff report that is provided for each item contains the recommended findings for the SRC. So if the committee intends to approve the application, the motion must state the findings supporting approval, which already is in kind of the staff report that's presented to you. If you decide to deny an application, then you also need to explain and state the reasons for denial. Next slide, please. And just kind of a brief kind of overview, like a legal overview about the findings that you're asked to make each time you approve or deny an application. Actions taken by the SRC must have a rational basis, meaning there must be a reasonable relationship between the evidence you heard during the hearing and the decision to either deny or approve the application. with respect to the conditions that SRC approves to be imposed on a specific project, there must be an essential nexus between the impact created by the application and the conditions imposed. Also, the value of or burden of a condition must be roughly proportional to the extent of impact created by the approval. And what just that means, I think, all of this is already kind of taken care of in the way you do your conditions of approval. They're related to certain triggers. And, as an example, say there is a parcel map application that comes before you for a lot split one parcel into two, and there's no kind of additional development proposed as part of that application, then, the county can't require the applicant to, as a condition of splitting the parcel, kind of widen the road to its ultimate right-of-way in front of the house, since there's kind of no development impacts yet. And kind of the appropriate approach is to then tie any additional street improvements or road widening to a future development proposal. That would be the appropriate trigger. So that's kind of, that's already inherent in kind of how planning and county staff kind of sets up your approval documents and the conditions of approval. Next slide, please. The continuances. The chair can make or entertain requests for continuances. Sometimes I think we know in advance of the meeting whether an item should be continued. Sometimes it happens during the meeting itself. If an item is continued, it should be continued to a date certain, meaning, you can't just continue it to you have to identify the date of the meeting to which you would consider the item again. And, an item should be continued if circumstances so require. So what are those circumstances? Essentially, that's when either the applicant is not present, or if the committee needs additional information from staff, the staff is not able to provide at the meeting, and that information is significant enough to kind of determine how a specific member votes. And also if the members of the committee want to make substantive changes to the conditions of approval or add conditions of approval. And again, this is where kind of your member hat versus staff hat comes in. Because applicants should be given sufficient time to understand the conditions that are being imposed on their project, kind of best practice is whenever there's a substantive condition that has not been contemplated before, or if it's like a major change that was not kind of discussed with the applicant previously, the item should be continued so that the applicant has sufficient time to kind of review those conditions, consult with their engineer or attorney if they want to, kind of in private outside of the meeting scenario. And I think, we've moved away from that already, in the sense that the SRC has been doing a good job in making sure that we limit kind of the changes we want to make to the conditions on the fly. So that's just another, that just, always remember that if there's a substantive condition you want to change or add that wasn't addressed to the applicant or to the planning staff person presenting the item, it's best to continue the item to a different meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think, we're done with kind of the rules of conduct of SRC business. And so this is just, the last few slides are kind of a very general overview about the Brown Act, which applies to the SRC, and also kind of like last minute comments from both planning and the board clerk. So Brown Act, essentially what it means is you cannot act on anything that's not on the agenda. There's a meeting agenda that must be posted at least 72 hours in advance of an SRC meeting. And we do all that already. Next slide, please. All SRC business must be conducted in an open and public meeting. So all SRC members are, open to the public, even though many, and sometimes I know, especially when a project is controversial, then more members of the public attend. But all meetings are open to the public. Meeting, is defined under the Broad Act very broadly. Includes hearings, this workshop, basically any time a majority of SRC members congregate that is not otherwise covered by an exemption to the Brown Act. And, that includes the prohibition against the majority of SRC members talking privately about an item of business, even by phone or email. Next slide, please. So, serial meetings. The Brown Act prohibits serial meetings. That occurs when when a majority of the SRC effectively develops a concurrence through separate conversations or contacts with one another or through an intermediary. And kind of this, I wanted to talk more about this because, I think some of the members of SRC also attend and are kind of involved in the PRC meetings. And it's such a fine line as to when it becomes a serial meeting, right? And so just, I want, members should be cognizant that this is something that we should be aware of. And like, as an example, say, Brian, there's a controversial project application that's coming before the SRC and you're at PRC, or, just came out of a PRC meeting. And then, Tony, for example, says, hey, there's this project, says to Brian, hey, there's this project coming to SRC, for these reasons, I have, issues with it, probably not going to vote for it. And Brian says, yeah, me too, probably not going to vote for it. And then Brian, say, talks to Kimber, like a few days after, and says, hey, I have concerns about this project. For these reasons, I don't think I'm going to vote for it. And, oh, by the way, Tony also shares the same concerns. I don't think we're going to vote for it. Kimber says, okay, and then talks to another person. So that essentially, at that point, you've essentially gotten a concurrence as to how you're going to vote or decide on a matter. And that's kind of what the Brown Act prohibits with the serial meeting prohibition.
And that's a very timely point to bring forward because, the city council of Sacramento seriously got in trouble for doing exactly that. And,
right.
And, the cost to the county or the city isn't yet resolved, but the actual damages, not counting punitive damages, exceeded $100 million.
Right. And, also kind of the consequences of if you're found to be in violation of the Brown Act, then kind of the consequences for all those items that you approved at that meeting where there was a violation, there's a potential that those are voided if it's not corrected and all that, if you don't go through kind of the correction process laid out in the Brown Act. So anyway, next slide, please. There are certain instances where a majority of, or the entire SRC committee, the committee can show up in a public gathering. Next slide, please. Oh, it's the slide before that. Yeah, so the exception. So there's just a few exceptions that we thought, could apply to the SRC. You could attend a conference or similar gathering that is open to the public, involving discussions of issues of general interest. You can, attend well-publicized community meetings organized by people or organizations other than the SRC or the county to address kind of local community issues. You can attend as kind of SRC. A majority of you can attend noticed meetings of another body of the county. such as the planning commission or the board, or board meeting. And you can also attend, like a majority of you can attend social purely ceremonial occasions, but which I can't imagine what that would be for SRC. Anyway, last slide. Some final thoughts. The meetings of the SRC and the zoning administrator may be convened and noticed as a simultaneous or concurrent meeting. And the board clerk and I think planning management's working on the specifics on how that should be done. Chris or Alma, do you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I would just say that exactly as Katrina pointed out, we are looking at some changes that SRC members will begin to notice pretty soon on items where there is both a request for the subdivision review committee, but there's also a parcel map, but also a request for a special development permit. The way that we're going to be handling those requests are going to change. We are looking at kind of structuring the report package, but also the recommendations that come before the subdivision review committee to basically bifurcate the recommendations on the parcel map from the recommendations on the special development permit, and hold basically joint meetings of the SRC and ZA during the SRC time slot.
But
so that
the chair, or excuse me, the SRC members wouldn't be voting on the ZA item.
That's correct.
They would just be
that's
a joint
what we're
meeting, and then the ZA would take action separately during the same meeting.
Correct. That's what we're working on now. Obviously, the item before you this morning was only a parcel map. There was no special development permit for consideration, but we're working on those procedures and working on a process there. And so when the next item comes before you that has both of those entitlements, that's the way that we're looking at handling it. To that end, we're also looking at making some changes to the membership from planning side of things, or planning's representation at the hearings. That's why we have our current zoning administrators that are on this training as well, because we're looking at making some changes to the membership so that they will be serving as the SRC members and also serving as that ZA in that ZA capacity during these hearings as well.
That makes sense.
I didn't have anything to add. I think Chris covered it. This is Alma.
The other thing, maybe just while we're doing final thoughts and before you go back, Katrina, and do your final thoughts on role of county council. The other thing that I should mention is that planning staff are evaluating the recent state changes, particularly SB 9, that requires ministerial processing of certain parcel maps, two lot parcel maps. And so we're going to be looking to, determine how that's going to impact what is heard before the SRC and what is not heard before the SRC.
Okay, and I don't have anything else. I mean, role of county council for SRC, again, as I said, I'm here to provide advice on SRC related issues. To members of the SRC. So if you have any questions at all, I think if you see an item before you on an agenda packet for a meeting, that's coming, and you have some interest, you want to talk through potential interests or conflicts of interests, feel free to, reach out to me. And if you have any questions about kind of how, like procedural questions about SRC meetings, feel free to also contact me. But it's Brian is kind of has the institutional knowledge too, serving as the chair for so long, and so just thank you for that. That's kind of my last thing on this. And so unless you have any additional questions or comments, that ends our training workshop for today.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Katrina and Chris for doing this. I think it was timely, especially with changes coming down the pike. So really appreciate you taking the time to put all this together for us. Very good update.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, moving on our agenda, do we have item number 5 would be our staff update. Do we have any other staff update?
We do not.
Okay. Any comments or thoughts from the Subdivision Review Committee members? None appearing. Do we have any public comments?
There are currently no public comments at the moment.
Hold on a moment. We might have a public comment. I'm checking with staff really quick.
Okay. We will wait.
Okay. There's no public comments. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, with the pleasure of the committee, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.